After staring longingly at maps, I developed an urge to undertake a hiking experiment. Somehow, I managed to seduce more than 25 of my mountaineer friends to join me by making what would later turn out to be exaggerated claims about the trail being easy. A year prior to this experimental hike, I climbed Mount Inglawan alone, and during that deeply personal expedition, I told my guide that the landscape in Bakun resembled Kibungan's. There were walls of rocks with their often barren, jagged crowns reaching aimlessly for the skies, where the trails meandered along sheer cliffs or rose and fell with an indecisive contour of the mountain ranges. His response got me very excited. Kibungan, he said, was just on the other side of Mount Kabunyan. When I returned to Manila, I compared GPS information, studied topographic maps, and came to the conclusion that Mounts Kabunyan and Tagpeo were opposite peaks of the same ridge on this range of mountains called the Cordilleras. This got me wondering whether there was a trail that threaded both peaks, whether it was possible to start the hike in Bakun, go up to Kabunyan, and end up in Kibungan. The GPS data showed that in terms of distance, Kabunyan and Tagpeo were not far apart. The question was, could it be done? I asked locals and guides on both sides of these interior Benguet towns, and the responses that I received were positive and encouraging. There was a sliver of doubt in my mind about how long or short it would take us to cross the divide, but despite the scant and possibly inaccurate information we received, many of my friends expressed interest in testing my hypothesis. In fact, most of them signed up even before I made the suspect claim that it would be easy. Our reward for hurling ourselves headlong into the unknown and untested was the pure satisfaction of proving an idea. Like many northern journeys, we began our expedition with a trip to Baguio. Every time I am on these northern trails, I would often pause to either catch my breath or to glance where I've just been, and I would marvel at how far putting one foot ahead of the other has taken me, how high up I was compared to just a few hours earlier, and how instantly tragic and beautiful the world truly is. Lonely pine trees precariously perched on narrow ridges would pierce the white surface of clouds that are streaming slowly like a lazy river over the mountains. I could not imagine myself being anywhere else, to have the heavens on my feet and still an unimaginable piece of earth above me. This is the kind of cheerful loneliness I seek. I cannot recall the number of times I stopped to admire the view, but I know that it equals the number of times my breath was taken away. It is always in these places where my lungs are so wide open and I am always so awestruck. The following day, we embarked on our experiment. I told everyone not to ask how much further we had to go. This was part of the deal. This was an exploration, although I sweetened its taste and softened its impact with a claim that it would be boring and unchallenging. The forest changed many times, its inhabitants alternating from hulking trees to overgrown bushes to groves of hairy bamboo arranged in disorderly rows. Very suddenly, I came to realize that I was somewhere very familiar. The terrain that unfolded before me resembled in every painfully beautiful inch this place that's close to my heart, where I've walked several times before, threading disparate trails with desperate fascination. I felt once again that I was going home after having been away for such a long time. It didn't take too long for us to come upon a pine tree nursery about 150 meters below Tagpeo, and that's where we built our nylon village. Our final day was marked by a punishing descent that was dusty, dry, and prickly, with some portions extremely steep. It seemed as if you stood directly over the person just below you. Just as my knees began to wobble, we began to hear the sound of water rushing over rocks. We had reached the end of the trail where a vegetable truck brought us back to the poblacion
Who
of
was eaten by a
Kibungan.
lion?
This Bakun-Kibungan Traverse
Yung
owes
merong gano'n?
much of its inception to a curiosity sparked by maps, familiar landscapes, and the willingness to do things differently. But it would have just remained an idea if no one provided fuel for its
Ano pa yung
completion.
balance mo?
I am grateful that there are those among my friends who are not intimidated by the untried, who willingly offer themselves as pawns for an experiment. We don't know how soon we can return to the mountains, but when that happens, I hope we all find new trails or new reasons to walk on old, familiar ones.